episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so excited you're joining me today. Today I have two very special guests, Otto and Bethany Nielsen. They have 4 children ranging from 3 to 15. Otto is a chef who has trained under Francis Fukushon, who has also been a guest on this podcast. Francis trained in France, and Otto has picked up so many good things from him. I actually worked with Otto at one of the NSA president's dinners. I would say that he was the sous chef and I was the sous chef. Does a sous chef have a sous chef? Regardless.
Commis. You were commis chef.
Okay. I told Otto when I was searing very expensive meat, like, please watch over my shoulder and tell me if I'm doing anything wrong. So that was, I was a little nervous there, but thankfully I pulled it off.
You did great.
Well, thank you. And Bethany is an art teacher at Logos. How many years have you been an art teacher?
This is my 20th year.
And she comes into my 2nd grade classroom once a week. It's so fun. The kids love her more than they love me, honestly. It's their favorite class. If there's ever it's very rare, but if there's ever a moment it has to be canceled or rescheduled, it's, we have to somehow pass out extra candy to make the day continue.
I miss it too.
So welcome, Otto and Bethany.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
Actually, the very first introduction I had to Otto was, and I guess, Bethany, you were probably helping him, but he did a pop-up restaurant the summer that I first moved to Moscow. And my sister had tickets and invited me, I think probably within the week of me driving into Moscow.
Special.
I
so
literally
made it.
I think I borrowed one of her dresses. Who even knows where my clothes were?
Well, I'm so glad I could say welcome to Moscow that way.
I'm so glad you came. That's awesome.
After eating that multi-course gourmet meal, I thought, okay, the decision was a good one. There was good reason to move to Moscow, and please continue your pop-up restaurants.
Oh, yeah, we got to get back to that.
Yeah.
Took about a year off.
That was very fun.
So special. That was the summer menu, too.
Didn't try to take a year off. Those pop-ups resulted in me getting people requesting me to come do my birthday.
Yes.
Come do our anniversary.
For
so
sure.
It's like, I just don't have time now because people are just having me come do a little, pop-up event, whatever.
Busy.
Well, you do. I mentioned you are a chef, but that's not your full-time job.
It's not.
What do you do full-time?
That's a good question.
He supports a family.
Yes.
It's very hungry.
I am more or less the administrator of a real estate development, construction, and property management company.
Yeah.
It pays the bills.
It pays the bills.
Along with...
Which is amazing.
Along with some pop-up chef work.
Yes. And it's a lot like catering,
projects.
so it's actually really fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, your day is varied. It's who knows what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
It's very true.
What do I do today?
and I get
Property management, construction.
Right. I get to participate
Good
in
for someone.
Pop-up restaurant.
Yeah. I get to participate in the design build of some hopefully upcoming restaurants.
I'm excited about that. We'll
that's
see
exciting.
how that goes. But also, it's such a blessing. It was a huge answer to prayer during the pandemic that we may need to find another job, and we got to work with Christian Brothers, which is such a gift.
Yeah,
so incredible. I've had the blessing of being able to work at Logos for forever, and I'm so blessed just by working with peers, with moms and dads, and they're becoming grandparents, which is so special to me. But I was a young mom, a young wife, just brand new. We started when I was engaged. It was like a few weeks before the end of the school year. It was 2004 when I first started. And it was so incredible. It was like being discipled while working, being inspired. And he has always just trudged along in anything that pays the bills. And I've always just prayed that he could have that opportunity to work with brothers as well, which is just so incredible and elevating. I think they have Bible studies like 3 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
And it's required. And our son is doing it as well. He had to get permission to miss the Bible study so he could have a birthday breakfast yesterday. So it's so lovely and it's very inspiring, and it gives him a lot of momentum and kind of fills him up a little bit, which is such an incredible gift.
This is my wife describing my work better than I could.
We're proud of
She sees the other side of it.
I'm just going to sit here and nod.
If only we had video.
I know, right?
You could see he was assenting to everything she said.
Yeah.
So how long did you train under Francis and learn the art of French cooking?
Cool.
Oh, I don't know if
And was that the first time that you trained
yes.
in the
absolutely.
kitchen?
Yeah, and I don't know if I could answer that off the cuff because young married, like staring down the barrel of having a baby. We had to step away from that, unpaid apprenticeship, which was glorious. And I definitely had no intention of not finishing it. And then I ended up working at a restaurant. Anyway, it was on and off. So I can't remember.
It did start with the elective.
Yeah.
Which Francis was a guest on, and he was a judge, I think. He judged some of the menu items, right?
No, it wasn't a judging thing,
sorry.
but yes, he was a guest at the aesthetic. The first time the aesthetic gastronomy elective was offered at NSA,
which is a beautiful elective.
Oh, it's awesome.
So special and very transformative. Every student that's ever taken it has
actually
loved it.
I don't know. I don't think I'm overstating it to say it kind of transformed NSA. There were some books on the reading list that became like required reading as part of the core like lordship
Absolutely.
class.
Father Capon, Supper of the
Supper of the
Lamb.
Lamb is one of them.
Yeah.
That was born out of that first elective.
Just a theology of food and hospitality, basically.
Yeah.
And enjoying God's goodness and transforming it with dishes.
And I think it was maybe
something happened to you during that elective.
Some small amount of Mr. Fukushion's participation in that. At that point, he had not opened his restaurant West of Paris yet. And I think that may have given him a little push in that direction, seeing like, okay, there might be a talent pool here I could draw on, or at least an appreciation of what I could do. This might work here.
So tell me a little bit more about the course. So you mentioned reading some books and having the theology of food and hospitality presented to you. Tell me a little bit more about that course.
Yeah, it was basically diving into, why does food taste good? Like, here we are, we're Christians. God created us in his image. And we don't eat bugs. We don't eat dirt. We eat stuff that is beautiful and tastes fantastic. Like we don't need taste. Maybe there's an evolutionary perspective that says that, well, if you taste something bad, it's poison and it helps you stay alive. Okay, sure. But
that's not always true, though. Sometimes people eat mushrooms.
Exactly.
Maybe they thought they tasted good and then they were poison back in the past.
But also at a very basic level, like if you are able to cultivate the food you need, it doesn't have to taste good to keep you alive.
Right.
Why
Just
do
to
we
keep
have
you
that?
alive.
What is that for? Right? Is that even the right way to describe it? Because that's a utilitarian description. Like, does it need to be for something? Okay, now what? God created us. We have this. What do we do?
And he gave us such an abundance, and including just his grace is so overabundant. It's always free. It's always there. And creation around us is filled with abundance, and how to transform that creation into beautiful food. And yet we're Christian and we're looking at this incredible abundance. How do you balance enjoying that abundance, not being greedy or overindulging, but God gave us flavor. He gave us love and desire of good food. Why is that? And it's hospitable and it shows love and grace.
And we're fallen and can mess it up, and that's called gluttony.
Exactly. Of course. So it was
just like anything else.
Amazing. It was so special.
But so it was just a deep dive into kind of philosophy of food and taste. And really, I'm unable to think of another worldview that can account for that.
Yeah.
Like, unless there is a good creator giving you gifts, why would you have taste and the ability to enjoy what you are tasting? It just doesn't make sense. There's no way to reason your way to that.
And also in this class, you create.
Yeah.
Like for the final, don't you create your own
every week
course?
So we had to,
Every week.
the first week we had to write a menu, like a 4 course, I don't remember, multi-course menu. And then at recitation every Friday after that, we had to bring the next course in our menu. And what we were graded on, we were given a name, like, this is who you trade your dish with.
I loved this part.
And then you taste someone else's dish.
Someone else's dish.
And what you were graded on was how well you could name the ingredients in that. So we were graded on our ability to taste, not our ability to cook at all. Yeah. It was not a cooking class in any way, shape, or form. It was 100% a tasting class.
And a lot of the students would just bring a family recipe. My mom cooked this. This is what I'm going to do. And that's what you did. You're German and Scandinavian, Norwegian and Swiss. And so you just brought that stuff. And to be able to taste someone else's family treasured recipe, that was really special too.
So one of the things I brought was my old family Swiss fondue. And Francis is from Lyon, which is very close to Switzerland, close to Geneva. And he spent some of his early career as a chef working at restaurants in Switzerland, and his family, that's kind of like here we are in Moscow. Yeah. And if we want to have a day at the lake, a nice vacation spot, we go up to Coeur d'Alene. Well, I guess if you live, I don't know, I've not been there, but I guess if you live in Lyon, your day at the lake is going to Geneva, you know? So
Hard times.
right.
I know, right? It's so beautiful.
So yeah, he has an affinity with, you know, the French Swiss type of thing. Now my family, my mom actually has cousins
Yeah.
in Switzerland. So there's somewhat recent emigration from there. And my grandfather went and found them. He, you know, didn't know their name, didn't know where they lived, but he decided right around the time he was retiring that he was going to go find them. So when I was very, very young, there was kind of peak excitement in my mom's family about discovering our heritage.
That's so special.
And we were all about like, oh, we're Swiss and it means this.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I grew up like people, I'm confused by people not excited by their heritage.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize, no, I'm not normal. Like my family was unusually excited about discovering their
They were so
heritage and
excited.
discovering their culinary traditions and family recipes. And we had these people from Switzerland come visit us and stay at our house.
That's so
and like,
exciting.
these are our family from Switzerland. Like, oh wow, that's
Yes.
cool. And this is what they do. And they are dairy farmers. They make cheese. They make
They have a
Swiss
cheese
cheese.
farm,
And they want to
yeah.
see what. And my dad's a farmer. He's like, well, I'll show you my buddy's dairy farm. Let's go look. And I mean, it was just like,
It was just this really
yeah,
neat
these
meshing
two
of
branches,
cultures.
right? These two branches of the family that had been isolated for a couple generations, all of a sudden are uniting again, and it's just so exciting that just getting thrilled about your heritage and any heritage is going to center around language and food almost more than anything.
Yeah.
It's easy to say it's about nationality, but that's kind of a modern construct. And once you go back far enough, really, heritage is about language, traditions, and language and food
And hospitality, for sure.
Well, yeah, sure, absolutely.
That's fun.
So that's what we got very, very excited about. So I was very excited about that. And Francis, when I met him, he kind of, I was taking this aesthetic astronomy class. And so here I am bringing up these food traditions that my family's all excited about. And he's like, oh, I recognize that. I was trained by a restaurant in Geneva that taught me that. How do you know that?
That's incredible.
And so I brought my traditional family Swiss fondue recipe.
Yeah.
And his eyes went wide. He was like, we need to cook together.
We were so excited.
You are
Oh my
hired
goodness.
as my sous chef.
There we go. It's,
Bring your
Eventually-
recipe.
eventually.
Yes.
He had to
worked my
earn
way
it.
up
You had to earn it.
sous chef. So
Yeah.
but so when he started West of Paris, I didn't immediately start as an apprentice there, but eventually, it made sense. He said, you should come cook here. I think this might be for you. And I was like, all right, I love to cook, I guess. And then I
Well,
ended
what
up
a great
loving it. Yeah.
experience
That's so
and
fun.
amazing education.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It
It
being
was
able to add
so
that
much.
into
I grew up on a farm.
science, math.
I grew up on a
literature.
farm bucking hay, and I learned what hard work was in a restaurant. And it's a good thing I grew up on a farm.
Because you had the endurance.
I had the physical endurance, and watching my dad, like knowing what it meant to give your all because you had to, because it mattered. And, I was a young teenage punk. I was only working quote unquote hard because I had to, because there was punishment if I didn't.
Dad was making me.
Exactly. Sorry, Dad. I love you, man. Your example has been amazing, in my
amazing.
life.
We
So
love
important.
him.
I wish I wasn't that type growing up on the farm. I would have learned so much more, so much faster. It took me getting kind of, I immediately right there wanted to say broken, working in restaurants to learn like this, you have to desire this. Learning how to want to do the hard things. That happened to me.
Well, God used
restaurants.
the farm work and
He
the
did.
restaurant
He
work.
did.
Sounds
Right.
like as just a growing process.
And at the same time, I was a student at NSA. So I was developing
you were
a lens.
being transformed.
Yes, I was seriously being transformed and developing a lens with which to look back through my history and be like, oh, that's why that was so important. And I didn't know it till now. Putting on these glasses and reading my memory and saying, holy cow, I wish I would have known how to look at this when I was actually in it. But
Right. Many of us feel that
God
way.
got me there somehow.
Well, seeing where you both are now, that does remind me as a parent, a lot of listeners have children and all children, God is growing them independent of you.
Yes.
And I remember having teenagers. I have one still. The rest are in their 20s. But just seeing your children go through those hard times, like
yeah,
you're talking about,
absolutely.
they're struggling or they're, you can tell they're really needing to whatever it is, needing to learn this or that. And it's hard as a parent to see your kids go through that. but you have to recognize that's God working in their life
Oh,
and
absolutely.
transforming.
Absolutely.
And for you, just
Yeah.
for years, and I would say that's everyone, honestly. I suppose teen years especially can be hard and transformative. But, working on a farm, then a restaurant, then going to college, that whole process turned you into a fabulous dad
Absolutely.
and husband and all the other roles you currently have.
Amen. I agree.
I'm blushing.
And God is still at work in all of us.
Oh, amen.
So,
yeah, that's pretty special.
well, tell us now that we've talked all about food, tell us one of your favorite menus that you would serve to your family, to guests coming into your home. Like when you think of something you would serve, what would it be?
Well, one of the constraints we have right now is we have such a tiny space. I know our house is not like the size of this basement, but it's very, very small. And so we often have to do like seasonal hospitality where we can only have people over when most of them can be outside by the fire. And then what we end up doing a lot is there have been times we were do you remember this? So poor and had so little space that we would just cook something and start dropping food off at friends' houses. Do you remember when we would do that? Like for Reformation Day. That was so fun. And you were cooking madeleines and I was making madeleines and we couldn't have anyone over, but we could bring people food. So we would just surprise people with food. So right now we do a little bit more of like dropping off food, which is so special because that's kind of how we celebrate as a family. We cook together and we make food and we want to share it. We just don't always have the room to share it. So we'll just like outsource it and all the kids will be in a train and they'll each carry something and we'll bring things. So we do that a lot right now.
Yeah.
But we do want to have people over in our house where they're not sitting on top of each other. Someday, Lord
as
willing.
a caveat,
Yeah.
I've heard that you make donuts.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You used to make them and sell them. Now you
did
just
for a little
make them
while.
for your family and friends because that's a bit overwhelming. But you're famous for donuts, apparently.
Beignets. It was actually because we were doing a wedding and we designed something
Teacher
for a
comes
bride.
out like correction.
I know, right?
They're beignets.
They're actually
okay?
beignets. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
just so you know.
Well, I had to make sure that they were actually beignets because they were originally donuts. And then we were like proofing the dough in a very special way.
Oh.
And I found that I could do about 200 to 500 really easily. And so we designed the menu originally for a bride because she was very gourmet. She was from Portland and she loved Moroccan flavors. And we were going to do some Moroccan like wedding cookies. But her father came to me and asked me, can you make me a chocolate donut? I don't think I'm going to like the food she's going to pick. I like normal food. And so I was going to make her a chocolate donut.
Very much, steak and potatoes.
It was really sweet. And of course, we weren't trying to accommodate that
She's
as
going
well.
to have all this frou-frou food
It's gonna be
at the
fancy.
wedding that you're going to make.
What's
Can you
so
just
funny is
can you
he
just bring me a
asked for
donut?
chocolate
Isn't that
donut.
so sweet? And so
He
I
was
thought,
like, yeah,
okay, I'll make
just bring me a
it.
donut so
I'll
have
put it in a
something.
box. And I'd just been making donuts for the family. And we realized that we could make a Moroccan, like
Right.
orange blossom anise donut. And then we turned it into beignets
So
because we can feed a huge crowd.
We sat down and we took our donut recipe.
Yeah.
And I took the idea of a beignet. I don't know if they're technically like true New Orleans beignets, but whatever. They're fried dough.
These are not
Anyway,
from a pâte à choux with a butter flour.
Well, that's a French beignet.
A French beignet. These are different.
A New Orleans beignet is a yeast risen dough.
Is that accurate?
I haven't been to New Orleans.
Does it sound okay?
It sounds right.
Okay, got
I
it.
know because I saw it in movies.
Right. I've heard of it from friends who have traveled to New
There you
Orleans.
go.
So we just sat down
yeah,
and we
that's
started
special.
picking apart
Yeah.
our donut recipe and saying, okay, what are we going to do with this? And it was
Yeah.
a buttermilk
It was a buttermilk
recipe.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had this idea for the, this traditional Moroccan, because the bride wanted a very Mediterranean menu. And I
Yeah.
had been up to that point very interested in North African cuisine and Middle Eastern cuisine.
and anise and all these
And I was like,
beautiful
okay,
spices.
I would love to do Mediterranean, but can it please just not be your standard, like south of France, Italian, like if it's like frequently, if someone says this is a Mediterranean menu, it's basically just an Italian menu.
It's kind of like
Right.
Tex-Mex in the South. It's
It's
not
true.
true Mexican.
There we
It's
go.
a
I think
blend
it's
of
called
countries.
Texican
Yes.
is what I heard someone
Texican.
describe.
Tex-Mex, I think. But yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Cali-Mex in California.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I guess it takes different forms and depending on where you are in the United States. But
Sure.
regardless, people who have traveled or have lived in
Yes.
Mexico would say, oh, that's not Mexican
That's not Mexican food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
that's
asked her,
not
I
true.
said, are you willing to get a little experimental and do the Mediterranean
And
fare
she was
that
so sweet.
most
She was
people
great.
aren't used to? And I was like North African, Moroccan.
Yeah.
And she was like, I love Moroccan.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of Moroccan ingredients go really well with Northwestern ingredients.
It's true. Yeah. There's a lot of products we have here in the Northwest, you know, like the apples, you know, lots of fruit trees we have and the stone fruits, you know,
lentils.
And then the lentils and the chickpeas, like so much of that features largely in North African cuisine and Moroccan cuisine. And I'm just like, this makes sense. If I'm going to, I don't know, this is maybe a very far off dream, but if I'm going to like be some small part of developing a Northwest cuisine, it's like, maybe I need to start researching other countries that use similar products and see what happens. But anyway, so that all plays into the decisions I make when I
It does. Also based on the equipment we've just acquired from the last pop-up restaurant.
Correct. But yeah, so we took this idea like, okay, traditional Moroccan wedding, you know, recipes. And it's like, okay, let's make this ours. We have this donut. We're going to make it a beignet. We're going to infuse it with orange blossom water somehow. It's like, okay, so it's a buttermilk recipe. So let's just, what's like buttermilk? Well, yogurt is thicker. It's like buttermilk.
It makes it very tender.
And then we can add a
It's very
boatload
delicious.
of orange blossom water to it. And now it's the same texture as buttermilk. It's like, there we go. Now we have basically something that will function, for lack of a better word, chemically the same way in the recipe and have the same, you know, liquidity as buttermilk. So we developed this, mostly her. This was largely her development.
Well, the donut part.
I was thinking flavors and textures, and she was actually on the execution level making it work.
Yeah, but you came up with the magic ingredient for the coating.
Yes,
that was very
fun.
special.
And that was like a first try, like
It
first
was
pitch, right down the middle, crack. Like, oh
That
my
was
gosh,
you.
that's
All
awesome.
right.
That was all
awesome.
you. Yeah, there was
That was
something missing
amazing.
in the powdered sugar coating, and you thought of this one thing, and we
Well,
added it. And it was
the
amazing.
wedding cookie recipe we're looking at was the flavor profile was orange blossom water and anise. And so I was just like, okay, what are we going to do? And we got the orange blossom water worked into the dough. And when it fries up, it's so aromatic. It's just like, oh, this is amazing.
It's amazing.
And then we would just take whole anise seeds. And I was like, I'm going to try this. Let's see if this works. And I just toasted them in a dry pan, ground them powdery fine, and mixed them with powdered sugar because beignets get coated with powdered sugar. And I'm like, all right, let's try it. And we just tossed them in this aniseed powdered
I
sugar
should have brought
coating.
you some. I'll bring you some. It's fine. It takes a couple
We're
days
going
to
to
prove
pause
the dough.
this podcast. You're not allowed to finish until the
Until beignets are on
present
the
in
table.
front of me and I can taste this. Is this a top secret recipe?
Not terribly.
No, I think I could write it down. I've actually never written it down.
But yeah, so
I was just wondering
always
if you
put it in
know,
my head.
we could share it with our listeners.
You know what? I will try to
But if
remember
not, it's
the
okay.
proportions. I'll write it down as much as I can and double test
This
it.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm really bad at working from a written recipe. I always
that was one of
change it.
the things I learned in restaurants is that recipes usually fail you.
You just go, you have to
You
know.
just go.
You have to know the
By
proportions.
instinct.
With baking, it's different because it's very like
like
it's
chemistry.
way
Yeah.
everything.
It's more scientific.
Yeah, it's way more formulaic and mathematical. But you know, every time you sear a steak, that was not the same cow as last time. It's not going to be the same, and you have
And
to
your
go
stove might
by
be
feel.
different.
Yeah.
You whether you're cooking it.
Altitude.
Yes.
Yeah, barometric pressure, like the weather. Yeah.
So
for sure.
you basically walk around with some general ratios of how things work in your head, and then you build from that. And I do have a lot of recipes written down, and I will consult them, and I will never follow them to a T. Like I just, and most of my recipes are, well, in the restaurant world, we call you say it's booby trapped. Restaurants are extremely competitive.
They're
One of the biggest
competitive.
problems they have is employees stealing their
Like
their
dishonest
ideas,
sous
stealing-
chefs.
Yeah, sous chefs stealing a chef's idea and
makes
going
it sound like
and
they're
starting a
pirates.
restaurant across the street.
Yeah,
and there's
really.
tons of stories about like what's the real New York pizza slice of pizza,
Yeah.
and there's like these two restaurants like across the street from each other, and one of them stole the recipe and went to the other, and
That's
now
just
they've
so
hated each other for
intense.
120
A
years or
rivalry.
whatever. Yeah,
Wow.
it's
so
wild.
funny. It's very volatile. The restaurant world is very volatile.
I can imagine because that's easy intelligence to steal.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because the sous
Yeah.
chef has to know how to make
Often
it.
the restaurant's recipe book will disappear if there's a team change up. If the chef gets fired, his team will steal the recipe book. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we were.
So
we've tried
there's a lot
to
of in
avoid
restaurants.
that.
There's a lot of booby trapped recipes. Like you kind of have to be in the know. The recipe will fail you unless you know like where.
You have to know how to tweak it and actually
Exactly.
make it really good, 5-star, top
So
notch.
all my recipes, I don't booby trap them. I will list ingredients and put no measurements next to them because like I know what it needs to be and it needs to be a little different based on what it's going with. So I'll just like, hey, you need some of this, you need some of that, make it work.
Okay, so
That's what a lot of my recipes look like.
when I get recipes from you, are they going to be booby trapped?
Unfortunately,
it'll look
yes.
weird. It'll look coded, but it's
And
proportion based.
I'll get people. Sorry, people out there who I've done this to. I love you, but I don't have patience for it anymore. They'll be like, well, how much of that do I put in this sauce? I'm like, well, what are you putting the sauce on? Well, I don't know. I want to make it to see what sauce it goes on. Like, well, you'd make it differently based on what you're putting it on.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have fun with it. Well, but how much should I put? I'm like, I don't know.
Most of us are not creatively trained chefs.
when I'm in the trenches making it, then I will know.
Then you'll know.
But right now, when we're just talking about this thing I make, like, you think you've tasted the exact same sauce, 6 different times at events you've come to that I cooked for. You have not. They taste the same because they've been altered to pair with the rest of the menu.
Yeah.
So they seem cogent, they seem continuous, but that's only true because I've changed them so that they feel that because they're complementing something that if I made it the same, it would be wildly different because that pairing changes things too much.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, when you're old and gray and hobbling around the kitchen, you're going to be the person that your grandkids are following around with a notepad and
studying
pen
them.
and telling you to cook
What's
while
that
they
proportion
jot
again?
everything down.
Yeah.
Before you throw the
gosh.
pinch of whatever in, they're
It's
going to measure it in a
true.
measuring spoon and write that
we
down.
do have like family recipes where the proportions are absolutely memorized, even if I don't have it written down. And I have to remind myself to write down recipes because sometimes we'll lose like touch with a restaurant. We worked in a restaurant in Oregon. There was a beautiful recipe for a chocolate cake that was flourless. And after we left, I realized I didn't have the recipe for the chocolate cake. And so I had to write it down in a journal somewhere.
Because we don't steal recipes from restaurants.
Right.
No,
We're not that
I
type.
checked. They closed the restaurant. It's okay. Sorry. I did check. But yeah, no, I was very worried about that. So I have some recipes and journals. You have like a little leather-clad notebook that's extremely valuable, more valuable than anything else because it has Francis's recipes
So we
in
know
French.
what you're going to grab if the house starts burning.
Yes.
It's
You're both
actually
gonna
going to
run
be in
for
a
your
safe.
recipe books and
I'm going to
run
grab
out the door.
my knife kit,
Knife kit.
my recipe book,
And
my
Lucy.
notebook from when I was an apprentice, and then I'll start going for the kids.
Going for the kids. Hopefully me eventually.
Hopefully.
Oh, actually, there was an incident once. We were visiting family over Christmas, and it was in Seattle, and our car got broken into.
Oh my
And that
gosh.
was right when we were helping to start the restaurant. And so he had brought with him his computer bag, like the laptop bag, like a briefcase.
But it didn't have a computer in it. It just
No,
had all my handwritten
It was filled
notes.
with all the codes for starting a restaurant.
Yeah, and like
notes.
health code. Like I was trying to weave my way through like health code for starting a restaurant and just
Yeah.
getting and so someone saw a computer bag, broke the
Grabbed
window
it.
and grabbed it, and I had
Yeah.
to start from day one.
But like God was very good, and we had not
But I
brought
did not-
your leather
Yes.
notebook. And
My
somewhere in the
notebook from my
world,
apprenticeship was
I love
not
that.
in
Like
there.
God was very kind to that thief. Somewhere there's a burglar who knows how to start a restaurant in Moscow, Idaho, and God was, I think, giving them a heads up. You could lead a productive life. You could start a restaurant. Fix your life, son. Yeah, it was
That
just
is a
so
really funny story.
So funny. It was so odd, but it was very a close call.
I had
You
my-
almost
Yes,
lost that
'cause
one thing.
That leather notebook.
it's
sounds
very
like
valuable.
it's
I
worth
had
its
a-
weight in gold.
I had a really nice
Yeah.
bass guitar in there. They didn't touch it.
Didn't touch it. I think they
That
went for
is
the
so
fast thing.
bizarre. You know
Yeah.
that they wouldn't open the bag. Maybe they're
They're
trying
like,
to just get away. But
There's a MacBook Air in there. I'm gonna snag it.
like, no.
There's an old like server training manual from when I was a server at Sherry's way back in the day, and I'm still using that as reference for how to build a server training manual. Like, there you go,
Wow.
bud.
That reminds
Go
me.
work.
Maybe it was last Christmas, maybe 2 Christmases ago. I sent some gifts to the South, and my daughter-in-law had them in her van, and they left the door unlocked. And where we lived in the South, you just don't do that. There's people who will take the opportunity to check your door, and anything inside is gone.
terrible.
Regardless, that happened. She just ran in real quick to a spot and came back out. And later on the cameras, it was totally set up, like a tag team type thing where somebody pulled in front of the camera.
Oh my goodness.
So you couldn't see what was
Oh,
happening.
wow.
They were just going through the parking lot, checking doors.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, everything was taken out of her van, which wasn't a whole lot.
Bummer.
Terrible.
But the Christmas presents were.
Christmas present.
Her purse was in there, which was far worse than the Christmas presents.
Yeah,
but
right,
I
right.
also laughed like you because the thief got coffee from the north.
Coffee from the north.
some really
you gave
good
them
roasted
presents.
coffee,
Yeah.
and Rebecca Merkel's soup cookbook.
Yes.
Oh, see, these are very productive
Yes.
gifts that could turn someone's life
Like,
around.
well, this thief
Repent of your
hopefully
sins.
repents.
Go, and you can start a
Go
household with this
and
information.
create a soup night, a hospitality
that.
soup night, and hopefully learn from your wicked ways.
I hope so. I hope these
There's
things
some
that were
Christian
valuable to us.
encouragement in there
That's
to
awesome.
serve the Lord.
Like there's
Drink
a charge,
good
there's a
coffee,
sermon in there.
Make good soup.
Yeah, there we go.
So back to your menu.
Oh yeah.
I know you said when you're living in a small space, you do like to take food, and oftentimes it's probably something sweet, I would imagine,
Yeah, it's
Or
usually sweet
treats.
and yeah.
to friends. But
A box full of beignets is real easy. That's
Beignets,
always well received.
We roast a chicken.
Yeah, I mean, frequently it's just, let's roast some chickens. And,
do you sometimes take a meal and just eat with them at their house? Like you're like,
Ooh,
I
every
bring the
once in a while we
food and we're
do.
just going to, if you have the
Yeah.
space and I'll bring the food.
Yeah.
Or do you usually
We've-
just drop it, visit, and then
Yeah.
go?
We have.
I don't know why.
He's been asked to cook the food.
I don't know why. Like, I like food. I'm not picky,
No, we're not picky.
but I think people are intimidated.
I think it's scary to have a chef
We don't
over.
get asked over to eat at people's
Oh,
houses very
baby.
often.
It's all right. There's actually a legend that
I mean,
chefs
They're
starve.
scared to cook for you.
Yeah, there we go.
I
But they
think maybe a little bit.
never get invited.
So usually when we get invited to cook somewhere, they're like, "Hey, we'd love to have you over. I kind of want to cook
wanna
something.
cook?
Can you show me?" Subtext: Will you come cook?
Will you come cook?
Because they're nervous you're going to judge.
They're nervous.
I guess, I don't
we
know.
try to train our children to not be picky, like be grateful, love, and just eat what's on your plate. And so, hopefully
we get invited
train
over
them
to
up.
places, and they're like, "Well, we're having leg of lamb. What would you do with that?" And I'm like, "Great, you invited me over here to cook for you.
It's
Awesome,
not cooked,
let's
is
go."
it? There you go.
If I
That
ever
happens a
cooked
lot.
for you, my philosophy on that, if I ever cooked for you, I would pick the most tried and true comfort menu that I knew how to make.
Exactly.
You are
Yeah.
hitting the nail on the
Yeah.
head.
That's
Like,
what I did
I've
when I
never-
invited the Fukushans
Exactly.
over.
Yeah.
Because
It
if
can
you
be
if
intimidating.
I tried to cook leg of lamb, of course he would judge it because it would be terrible. I
and
would
it's kind
not
of a
know how to
special
cook
dish.
it. It's a very special dish.
Yeah.
And again, not that I don't want to try to cook leg of lamb or improve on it, but that's not the time to, if I'm inviting you over, you're going to get some classic comfort food,
Something your-
Southern menu
That's
that my
really good.
teenagers love.
Something your great grandma taught you
Yes.
that raised a couple
Yes. And that
generations
will
of
make him
hale and
happy,
hearty
that
and
has
grateful
history to
people
it.
who love
Yeah.
eating.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's always what I'm after. Those are that's
Okay,
the
give me
hidden
your
treasure.
classic menu. What's your menu?
Okay. Yeah.
What's a favorite
thing?
dinner at your house besides beignets?
Okay, so I'm in comfort food a lot.
Grilled chicken.
Grilled chicken, and then the kids really love it. You do have to base it off of in hospitality. You love the little ones that are with you 1st and you really fashion everything around what they love, and then you can all experiment sometimes. But it's really important, I think, for like a mom to not just be worried about what she's going to cook for guests, but her first guests are her children, because they are guests in her home. We are shepherding these little ones so that they can leave someday, which is hard to think about. And we want them to want to come back. So we want to have them all have favorite things. And so every year I do a lot of home baking, and then we'll add and subtract things based on the feedback the kids have. So right now they're on a coffee cake kick. We have coffee cake every morning, or rolls. And then during the school year, obviously like all the home baked treats that go with them to Logos. You love eggs, and so we always have scrambled eggs or frittatas. But for budget, during the pandemic especially, it was very challenging. I remember when there was a little while when flour almost disappeared. Eggs got more expensive. So all the classic things that are cheaper, we had to sort of rework. Eggs are okay now for the most part. But we do a ton of macaroni and cheese, like homemade macaroni and cheese. And then I introduce
Different
like
cheeses every
meats to the
time,
kids. And we'll do like
different
7 cheeses,
noodle
6
shapes.
cheeses. Yeah.
That would go great with grilled chicken.
Oh, man.
Yes.
You mentioned, do you like grilled chicken,
Oh,
mac
yeah.
and cheese?
Broiled
We're-
chicken,
Comfort food.
sausage. We love
frequently-
sausage.
We are frequently on an experimental mac and cheese.
We
kick.
are.
You're
we
totally
are.
right.
And then oftentimes for like chefs, just for a break, just to give your palate a break after like a really big pop up when we're super tired and we don't have a ton of brain power left to invent something. You love like cured meats,
Oh yeah,
cheeses,
the
and
charcuterie
fruit.
board is
Yeah. So we'll kind of
kind of my
unwind
peak.
with something like that.
like menu. Like
It's like a picnic.
maybe it's because I
Yeah.
don't have to cook it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
It
a
makes you
simple-
happy.
But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this is a failing on our part, but we don't have a menu.
No, I do
Maybe that's
a ton of things that the kids like.
our thing that we kind of gather around is experimenting.
That's true. Yeah, I'll have the children come in and
So
help.
you just open the fridge and decide what.
Yes,
We was like,
absolutely.
hey.
I do tons of soups from everything I can find in the refrigerator.
My son Braden, he'll be like, Dad, I heard about this. Can we try it? And I'm like, yeah, I've done something like that before. I did it this way. What do you think? He's like, ooh, I heard about this ingredient, this flavor, blah, blah. And I mean, we go nuts, and we will just make something up based on just inspirations we're getting from, the day in, day out.
And it's a little bit challenging having, a smaller space, but I've found ways for the children to help.
Yeah.
Like at the table. So the kitchen is so tiny. It's like 3 feet clearance. And so people get stuck because the refrigerator door opens and then there's 3 people stuck behind it. So I can't really have as much help in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But if I can bring it out to the table.
I have to set up a folding prep table.
We set up folding prep tables, and the children help with crumbling the cheese.
Oh, yeah.
We do love those great big family salad
I think you're right, though.
meals.
I think our family dish is probably the rotating mac and cheese.
Possibly.
It's never the same.
They will always eat it.
There is no
Yeah.
there is no recipe.
There is no recipe.
No, there isn't. I've been whisking and making bechamel sauces since I was 9 years old.
She's better at it than I am. And I got trained by a French guy.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry,
decent.
chef.
That's all right. It's something I always did. Even when I couldn't reach the counter, my mom would put me on a chair and I would whisk because I could whisk. So having a good right hand, because I paint, so I have a strong right hand, so I can whisk for forever. So sauces, cheeses, soups, things that are chilies, even chilies, but things that are based with like a bechamel, so not so much chili. But we'll do a lot of that, and I'm teaching the children, but they have to be on little chairs. And so, yeah, that's what I'm comfortable with. And of course, we love fat babies, and so I'm always trying to keep the weight on. So as much flour and
extra cheese,
exactly,
butter.
Extra cheese and extra butter, making a beautiful glossy, cheesy sauce is always really, really helpful, and it helps them if they have the flu or something and they're back to normal. They need to get as much good stuff in them as possible.
Well, it's a great encouragement to get kids in the kitchen and teaching them even small parts, because then as they grow, they can, like you at 9 years old, or whisking
I was
up
so
a
little.
delicious sauce.
I might have been 7 or 8 when I first started baking, and my mom started me on, it was like sandwich bread and scones. That was my big thing. And I had to memorize the recipe. Very early, I figured out that I was better at memorizing proportions than following the recipe. And then as I got older, I was adding in things like soups and sauces, lemon curds, custards. When my mom was in an ice cream making phase, and we would do the custard, that would explode all over the kitchen and things like that. And then by the time you came along, I was very comfortable with stovetop cooking, but sauces and soups were definitely my most comfortable. You got me more comfortable with like roasting chickens and things like that.
I've almost got you.
Experimenting is a good idea.
It's a
Don't be
big
afraid to experiment.
Yeah, it pulls the family in.
Yes, and cook with your family,
And they have to
so
taste
that you
test
can grow
everything.
in your knowledge.
Yes, like Winnie the Pooh, who always checks for cheese in the middle of the honey. Like I have to get the kids who come taste the sauce, come check it. If I add this vinegar, what do you think? And so that's a big way that we celebrate, is we'll cook all day, and that's almost a celebration. We'll eat later, but the cooking is kind of more the party for sure. But what were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, what was I going to say?
I can't remember.
Oh my goodness.
That's okay. You're so tired. You had a long week.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say you got comfortable with certain types.
High temperatures.
One of these
That was a
days,
big
I'll
one.
get you comfortable with searing.
Oh my gosh. Just flames in the kitchen just really make me so nervous. And we always live below someone. So our neighbor, sorry neighbor, we love you. But whenever you cook beef, the smoke alarm goes off.
Oh, yes.
She was
for
not
sure.
saying that to the neighbor. She was saying that to me.
Not the neighbor. I'm sure she's
Whenever
perfect.
I cook
Yeah,
beef.
exactly.
Residential
So we have to be
kitchens.
careful.
Residential kitchens are not built for searing
They
properly.
are not.
It's another
built.
reason we're holding off on moving, is because I think that we will need to actually build out a proper vent hood and kitchen.
What I do now is I have an outdoor, like a Camp
You do,
Chef
a Camp
propane
Chef,
stove.
and that's
if I want to
fantastic.
sear something, I do it outside.
Yeah.
It is a waste of time and a pain.
Well, and we had started doing that
Do it inside.
originally
Yes.
because a lot of like the wedding where we did the beignets, there was running water at the venue, but there was very little like electricity. There was no kitchen. And so we had to set up an outdoor kitchen. And that's why we got the camp chefs.
Yep, I had 2
we had
camp
just
chefs.
earned enough from a pop-up restaurant to get a food pavilion, like a food cover, because it was a windy day.
Pop-up canopy tent.
So we had to do everything in the parking lot, in the back.
Under the canopy.
Yeah.
Open pot fryers making beignets.
And that was originally why we kind of started pop-up restaurants, so that we could have just enough to get a piece of equipment for the next catering gig. And so we've gradually acquired equipment, but we have found that cooking outside is really helpful.
So do y'all always cook your beignets outside?
Not always. No, I
if
have
we're
a
just
pot
doing a small
inside.
batch for at home, then we just have a Dutch oven on the.
If you serve
stove.
beignets or if you take them to friends, do you typically do like black coffee or do you pair
That is
anything
the-
with
You
know,
it?
that is a
that is the
question.
New Orleans way.
That is
I
the New
love
Orleans way.
that. I'm actually delivering some beignets next week.
No.
We haven't.
We
It's
just
to a
make
birthday party.
beignets. If coffee happens, it happens.
Yeah,
But
I love that. No,
But just
I'm-
delivering beignets is a super treat. I mean, if you're taking them somewhere, you
That is
can't
such a
take hot
good idea.
coffee.
I love
But if you were
that.
inviting a friend over or having
maybe
people
have
in
them
the
bring the
yard,
coffee too.
then that would be.
Oh, I love that
a
idea.
fun
That's
menu.
really good to know. Thank you.
how did we not know to do that?
I know. Well,
What's wrong with us?
I'm not Southern, even though I've spent a lot of time in the South.
I'm not even
I'm
sorta
just
kinda Southern.
trying to pick up. You're so
I
Northern.
would think up north, everyone thinks black coffee just because y'all are coffee addicts.
That's
up
It's
here,
true.
honestly.
I'm
Man,
a
we're
little
not
bit
very
weird.
observant.
I am weird that way. My godmother
you're-
was English, so
if you're
she taught me
carrying them
tea.
to a house, I mean, you can't really carry a hot
I love
pot
that
of coffee.
idea though. But yeah, mixing it. I love that.
When you take gifts to friends, are you taking them just because, or do you feel like, do you pick people who you think, oh, this person needs some encouragement or this person just had a baby, or do you just kind of take them whoever
It's
whoever
that-
pops into your head?
It's a little
that,
bit.
and then it's like, oh, and this house is on the way. So
This house is on the way. We would have a checklist.
Yeah.
We did that once because we couldn't see anyone on Reformation Day because you were working. And so as soon as you had like an hour, and so we wrote a list of families down that we knew were in the same general area, and we just started stopping at houses and seeing who was home and just dropping off food. So we've done that.
Oh, what a shame to not be
It
home.
was really fun. It was
When
really special.
You talked about inviting people because you have a limited space inside, you talked about inviting people outside. So of course summertime would work. A
Early
fire
fall.
pit,
Yeah,
fire pit
we have
in
a
the
fire
fall
pit,
would work.
Yeah.
What kind of hospitality do you do outside at your house?
Let's see. I mean, we were pretty busy. We don't do a ton of outside
maybe we're not the right
hospitality.
people for this
Yeah,
podcast.
I feel really bad. I hope we don't have.
we are really low key at
We are
home.
very low
maybe
key.
and maybe that's a result of cooking for us being more a profession.
Possibly.
So when we're at home, it's
it's
like
work.
paper plates. Come on, let's hang out. We're gonna make amazing food.
Melamine plates, the
and
little
not
melamine
have to
plates.
wash up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
sometimes
yeah.
that's the best way to go, though.
It can be
because
very nice.
It's easy
Comfortable.
to,
Yeah.
it's comfortable and easy
Yeah.
to do when you have worked all day long and you're working when you work in food, you're
Yeah.
working as a chef, then
Yeah.
you don't want to come home and continue hours and hours and hours of labor. So
Right.
Yeah, and my mom, I grew up with her like 3 different sets of heritage china.
Oh, yeah.
Like one for this type of Sunday, one for this type of holiday. And I think that's just so cool, to have that special treatment,
Yeah.
But, and we don't have that stuff. We should at some point someday.
I know.
And
We're
we
still
don't
waiting
have-
to be able to have a proper Sabbath.
Oh yeah. And we just don't have space. We're just not at that point in our lives yet
Okay.
where
The kids are getting bigger. The
Yeah.
house isn't. But
So
actually, we do
our
like
hospitality.
picnics.
Our
Yeah.
hospitality is really. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say this like I'm ungrateful. It's confined because we're confined,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean we don't do it. We just do it like
Do it
this
differently.
This is what we do. We want to have you here. We want to eat with you and talk with you. If we had china, we would use it. If we had china, we wouldn't have space to put it anywhere, and we wouldn't be able to wash it in our
Right,
kitchen.
so you're gonna have it-
Let's just do this because it's the fact of the matter is,
have
like we
dishes
said earlier,
that are
we have
low-key.
Yeah.
we have taste. We're brothers and sisters in the Lord, and we have this amazing ability to taste. And what does God say to do with that? Right?
I would rather eat your delicious food on low-key dishes than poor food on china. So
Right. And I would love to be able
I
to
would
have
care what the dish was.
and I would love to be able to have a banquet hall and all sorts of fine china and
Someday.
stemware.
I know. We dream about it.
I think that's a really
that's
good
not
point,
a
though.
barrier. Like not having that shouldn't stop us
Yes,
from just
not
doing.
everyone
Yeah.
has a mansion with a lawn and staff.
Sure,
and
sure,
so too, I think it's a really good point to what you said about your hospitality is confined. You have to recognize that God does give you certain circumstances, a certain size house, a certain budget, and working within that isn't wrong.
No, of
that's
course
what
not.
He gave you. So you have to work within it, and you should do so cheerfully and joyfully.
Right.
And
It's good for our kids too.
with being thankful
goodness.
for what you have.
God gives us fences for our protection.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Don't go over there. That will, that
Yes. So
the wages of sin
someone-
is death. So confinements of that sort that God has put you in are just
yes.
training for the
Yes.
reality
Yeah, they're
that
really good training
if you
grounds.
push beyond the fence that God has put there, like that's not good. That's going to hurt. It's
Well,
like, okay,
and
well, here's a
looking-
fence that I'm pretty much sure if I push beyond it, I'll be fine. But it's just a part of my life, and learning to work with that, barrier there, and knowing that barriers are there to, guide us.
Yeah.
Work with them.
and looking
learn how
over
to
the
explore
fence
within
at
them.
someone else's
Right, exactly.
circumstances
And-
and,
and
home and
developing-
abilities and
Yes,
budget
developing
is
contentment.
just
It's hard.
wicked.
It's not a good
It's
thing.
just so
It's going to
wrong
make your job
because God
terrible.
wants us to all grow in our own sanctification
Amen.
and recognize
Yeah.
where we're supposed to grow from and not be looking
Yeah.
over at
So, I
somebody
mean-
else and where they are.
Yeah.
We've done not frequently. I can only think of once or twice, but we've done hospitality where it's like, hey, we'd like to have you over to this park to eat with us.
Yeah, let's go have a picnic together. Can
is
we
a
bring 3
great
things?
idea.
Yeah. And it's also fun for the kids because they help me prep the things that we're going to bring. And it is good for our children to learn
Well, in a
to
natural
deal
play
in
place.
limitations. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
If you
my
have
kids,
a small
it's a no-brainer.
yard with
Yeah.
families with lots of kids, you just
yeah.
go to the park and it's an instant entertainment after dinner, and the adults can sit and
true.
enjoy visiting at the picnic table while the kids are super busy.
This is a fun place to eat outdoors too.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when we have a day off, we will just pack a picnic and go somewhere, and the children can help me prep the day before, but we love that.
I'm guessing I know what your must-have kitchen item is. Your knife set. He
Yeah,
brought,
he brought it. Yeah,
He brought
we were almost late because he had to
this
turn around
knife
to get
set.
this.
It's incredible. It's a rolled up bag.
Yeah.
And it says, well, what does it say?
It's a Messermeister.
Messermeister.
I would mispronounce it.
It's a really good brand.
I might be mispronouncing it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Messermeister.
So tell me about this knife set.
I wish I had one when I was in college. Everyone who is, high school, college age, who comes to work for, one of my pop-ups or one of my catering events,
yeah.
I just tell them, get a knife kit. Get one a third of this size. It doesn't matter. You're going to move every year for the next 4 years of your life, more than likely, I mean, some kids
Take your knives with you.
Yeah, some kids, they stay at home through college, and that's great for them. But most kids are going to be like, well, this roommate graduated and is moving out, and I can't get blah blah. I got to move somewhere, and I'm like, get a knife kit. You just roll up your knives and go.
And you usually
being
get them their
able
first
to-
knife.
Yeah,
You'll get them
I
as a
frequently
thank you
gift
for
knives
each of
for
the kids that
the
works
kids
for us.
who volunteer
Yeah.
for nothing but the promise of food and learning
We try
to
to
work with me.
We try to give them something.
But yeah,
special.
just being able to roll up your kit, go somewhere, and cook something
And be able to cook.
for your
Yeah.
you and your roommates.
Is that
Yeah.
your
Like-
favorite brand?
You like Wusthof, Messermeister. Our first one was
my current chef knife is
yeah.
a Messermeister.
Yeah.
The
It has to fit the hand
The
really
Messermeister
well.
knife roll is kind of the go-to in the restaurant world. Like you'll see more kids going to culinary school with this knife roll than pretty much any other type.
How do you learn to sharpen a knife? I'm assuming you sharpen your own.
Trial and error.
Trial and error. He has sharpening stones at home, but he does have a honer, which bends the blade back and rehones it. So it's not proper sharpening.
So on a molecular
yeah.
level, the molecular bonds between the steel, they will get softened by acids, various other elements, and the edge of the knife will basically start to roll over on a microscopic level, and you can realign that and re-strengthen those bonds.
Is the honer a machine?
No, it's what you would call a knife sharpener. So
This is some confusion.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that honing a knife is sharpening a knife. When you get, you go to Bed Bath & Beyond and buy a knife block, and it comes with a sharpener. It's like, no, this is a steel. It hones it.
I thought that was a knife sharpener.
This is
Is
not
that
a
so
knife
interesting?
sharpener.
It actually just realigns the blade.
This removes.
Mine is
little
circular.
if- yeah,
Yours
that's
looks
common.
more like a sword.
This is a gift from our
Very
son.
sword-esque.
Did,
like
did he
that
get it
one
for you
better.
from Father's Day or
Yeah,
something like
or
that?
something
Yeah.
like
So it hones it, but it doesn't sharpen it.
It resets the edge, but it doesn't refine the edge. It doesn't remove any steel and bring the
So the
bring
knife
edge
block
to
is
new.
incomplete.
The knife block
potentially.
cannot sharpen. It can only hone when it has the hone of the steel. The funny thing is, this is honing is more of like a chemical process than a physical sharpening. It's actually realigning the edge and strengthening the chemical bonds between the molecules and making it ready to stand up to the acids and the other, I say chemicals, so they're all natural products, but it is a chemical reaction we're talking about. It strengthens it and gets it ready to handle that. And it does that by rubbing steel on steel. Biblical reference,
Iron
anyone?
sharpening iron. There we go.
So you hone your knives
In
and
between-
then you sharpen?
In between, I will sharpen my knives less than once a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Like if
the
I was in
honing
day-to-day
happens
right.
regularly.
If I was in day-to-day restaurant work, I will probably need to sharpen them every 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Then day to day, if you hone your blade in between touching any product, you will keep it sharp a very long time.
Okay, see, I always considered that sharpening.
It is
but
not
it's
sharpening.
not.
But remember,
So
it strengthens
interesting.
those bonds. So if you don't do it, then that bent over edge has all these bonds that are even more exposed on that bent edge, and it just keeps getting weaker and weaker and bending more and getting weaker and weaker and weaker. If you reset it and re-strengthen those bonds, that will hold its edge a shockingly long time.
So every 6 months to a year, you use a whetstone
Yes.
to sharpen?
We used to find someone who could sharpen,
Yeah,
but
there
it
used
was
to be
really
a-
hard to
There
find
used to be
them
a
now.
guy with a truck full of equipment, and I would just
would
hire
come
him,
in
and it was like $30, and he'd sharpen
Yeah.
my whole knife
Yeah.
kit, and I just did it once a year.
All the knives in Moscow would get sharpened.
That would be amazing.
And then about,
Oh,
I don't know,
great.
8 years ago or so, I couldn't
think he
find anyone
retired or
locally who
something.
did that. And I was like, oh man, I could learn how to sharpen
Yeah.
my knives.
You did some research and got some
So yeah, just with the honing, like before I start,
What angle is that?
it kind of doesn't matter. Sharpening, the angle matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Honing, you're just rubbing steel on steel. You can just go at a 45-degree
So
angle
you're
and you're
not
fine.
going to mess it up with honing.
Not really. I mean, you could smack it. And,
Sure,
and
you're
you
not
could have
going
a
to want to
problem.
hit it straight on.
But you're just trying to rub the steel, rub iron on iron, and strengthen those bonds and realign them. So as long as you're close to the right angle of your edge, that's all that matters.
So for the home cook, they need
There you
to hone their knives.
Yeah.
How-
Watch some, go on YouTube, watch some videos. There's going to be 9 different styles, and every chef is going to tell you this is the proper way to do it. It's like, okay, buddy.
And then sharpening, they could find someone or what do you think about the knife sharpeners that are out there that not
You know
the
what?
whetstones, but like
the
the
little
electric
suckers are the ones you pull. Go for it.
sharpeners?
Yeah.
Go for it. The only thing you're losing there is a little bit of life on your knife. And for most home cooks, not restaurants where that knife is going 100 miles an hour, 10 hours a day, you're not going to lose those peel off too much product. So like for someone who's using their knife every day and needing to sharpen it a little more often, it's going to really reduce the life of that knife because it's going to grind so much steel off every time they run it through it. But for a home cook who's going to really need to sharpen it every once in a great while, and it just doesn't get anywhere near that use, it's not going to destroy the life of your knife hardly at all. Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it. And just know that you're choosing to remove more steel from the blade when you do that, and that's the trade-off.
What about the ones that are not electric, but more like it has blades that meet?
Yeah,
and
just
you
the-
run your knife
seen
through it.
those,
Is that
yeah.
honing
do
or
you think of
sharpening,
those?
I think those
or is that anything?
I don't know enough about those. I think they're trying to be sharpeners, and I think they're not very effective as sharpeners, and they're not effective at all as honers. So I don't know.
Maybe they're just not a good product potentially.
I can't see. I don't know. I can't judge on those because I just like, man, those are still selling, but I don't see how they're effective. But that's
So
a
the
statement out of
electric-
ignorance.
The
Interesting.
electric one would maybe be more effective. Don't have to do it super often.
Yeah, it's a great option.
But
But number
when you
one
say
thing
it
you
grinds
do,
the blade down, is that pretty microscopic?
right? Yeah. Using the electric sharpeners is probably about the same as sharpening your knife 10 times. So every one time you use that electric, and I'm making that up, I'm just guessing, but every time you use the electric sharpener, you're basically going through roughly 10 times the sharpening process. And the sharpening process is actually grinding bits of steel off to
resharpen
to
what was
remake
there.
to remake the edge. So yeah, you're losing little tiny bits of your knife, and you're just doing it at 10 times speed with those. They'll make a really darn good edge. And if you don't need to do it that often, then great. Lose 10 times the product and it'll still take a decade for you to
for the home
wear
cook.
through that knife. Yeah.
Well, and especially for a mom, I think a lot of us have a very similar rhythm of cooking because we kind of have to cook in bulk, and maybe it's like 2 or 3 times a week, right? And then leftovers, and like that's what I do. I probably do 2 really large dishes a week, and then I have the pieces that I use for leftovers, and then of course breakfast is always important. But
Breakfast is one of my favorite meals.
it is.
If I can circle back for a second,
yeah.
knife. Like everyone's like, what knife should I buy?
Yeah.
Like, what is the knife?
Yes,
And it's like,
give us this advice.
Sure. I don't know what your knife is.
Yes.
I can show you the proper way to hold it, a couple different grips and the proper way to use it. And once you know that, it should fit in your hand.
Yes.
It should be high quality steel and it should fit in your hand. It should match how you cook.
It's a huge test, how it feels in your hand.
Certain, there's various levels of, carbon in blades, high carbon steel. There's various, they call it Rockwell hardness grades. The harder the knife is, the longer it holds an edge, but the harder it is to sharpen. The softer it is, you got to sharpen it all the time, but it's really easy to do what works for you. Mm-hmm. And you just got to take some time. And I would buy a reasonably high quality, inexpensive blade to learn on. I frequently recommend you can go to any restaurant supply store and get the Forstner Victorinox. Some people they look down at them because they're in every cheap junk kitchen knife hanger in a restaurant in the world. And they're very inexpensive and available everywhere, but they're sharpened in Switzerland. They're literally Swiss blades.
Really?
Yeah. I still have several in my knife kit. When I got my son his first knife, it was a Forstner Victorinox.
Yeah.
And the Venerable Cooks Illustrated staff still says they are the best knives you can buy for your kitchen. And they're so affordable. It's
How
not
much
even funny.
is it at a restaurant supply?
Like $40.
Yeah.
That is not bad for a beginner knife.
Yeah. Or for,
Or
and like
just
I said,
to keep forever.
Yeah. And if you want to, you can get them with like nice rosewood, handles and
That is a hot tip.
yeah,
I
those
love
they're
that
great.
Now
And
I
if-
want to go to a restaurant supply and buy one.
You will be in heaven. Restaurant supply stores
Yeah.
are our salvation.
The other thing-
equipment they have, it's not beautiful, but that's half
Very
the trick.
functional
It's
and
They're
high
very much-
quality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something
Very
that's going to
functional.
last.
They're
for
very
over
much
and
function over
over
form.
and over.
Oh my goodness, for sure. And it is truly like such a trusty companion. So that's where we get a lot of our stuff.
And the other place to look is a website called knifemerchant.com.
Knife Merchant.
If it's not worth
great.
using, they don't sell it. Mm-hmm. So if something is on their website, it's worth buying. If you find a knife brand you like and it's not on that website, then your criteria are wrong.
It's very prolific. It's very good.
Good to know.
It's a company that was started by chefs who needed a way to make, reliable knives, vetted by chefs who cook with them, available to chefs everywhere. And it's the best resource for
That's where braiding goes for your
discovering-
Christmas presents.
It's the best resource for discovering, knife types and, getting information and buying them. Some of their prices are the best you can find.
I think we started when I would get you your first knife, like a nice knife. I would start at like Williams Sonoma, the places that I knew about. But the markup is big. And eventually he found that the hand shape was wrong.
And they're usually made for looks.
Yeah,
not
for looks.
function.
So even if they're higher quality, they're just not as high quality as these other places you can
Or
find.
at least high design
Yeah.
quality. They're designed for.
So it's taken us a while. You have like a
different
rowdy collection. You don't have a matching
yeah, heck
collection.
no.
It's a
It's
lot like
all
my
over the
paintbrush
place.
collection. I have favorite shapes and I get those and favorite construction.
I spend a lot of time thinking like, when I'm doing this, when I'm on the line and I'm just like grilling a ton of sandwiches and then cutting them diagonally and plating them really quick. Like I need a knife that just does this and feels this way in my hand. And I'll spend months
Trying to
finding
find the perfect
that
knife for that task.
that does that. And it's like my chef's knife works, but I like having my chef's knife for, okay, I've got 3 minutes in between this ticket and the next ticket. I need to be busy. I want my chef knife clean and ready to do the prep work, slicing cucumbers or whatever.
So
So
you
it's
don't
good to
need
go.
it cutting sandwiches.
Right. And so if I'm going to have a knife that's devoted to cutting sandwiches, then I'm going to get one that maybe works a little bit better than the chef's knife for that. Having said that, if all you have is a good chef's knife, you're good.
A chef's knife is worth its weight in gold.
I almost
chef's
never
knife,
use my
yeah.
paring knife. I will use my.
You
my-
refuse to use serrated edge knives.
the
in our
only one I
house,
have is
except
my
it's
is
the
my
cake
sandwich
cutter.
knife.
Oh yeah,
I use it for a bread
but
knife
the little
sometimes.
ones are like a no go.
Oh yeah. if I'm just going to slice bread, like I'll grab that bread knife sometimes, but I'll just use my chef knife. If you know how to
it's
sharpen
sharp
it,
enough,
yeah,
then it would
you
work.
know how to keep it sharp enough, then you don't need a serrated knife to go through bread. But I have one, but that was because I needed it for a very specific purpose. I didn't buy it because I needed a bread knife for every time I needed to slice bread. I was like, no, I need to be able to slice these sandwiches on this line really quick. So
And the bread knife sitting there is not going to, I need my chef's knife clean and bread knife sitting
Well, and
there
the problem
will
I
work.
had is like I use my chef knife so much, my hand just has this certain motion that's really efficient. And if you grab a bread knives are really short. They're like 1 inch wide, right? And then I'd go fast without thinking about it, and I just go down and hit my knuckles on the board, and I don't go through the bread all the way. And I'm just like, I can't
motion wasn't
stop.
right
I
for
can't
you.
stop and rethink my motion when 99% of what I do is with a chef knife. So I found a serrated. They call it a panini knife.
Yeah.
It's a Wusthof.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And I will actually stop sometimes if I know I'm going to be cutting a bunch of bread. I actually stop and get that as opposed to my chef knife because it's like, this is actually
A
incredible.
panini knife.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's tall. My knuckles fit into there. I can
your
grab
big
it. I can
hands.
grip it and move it like a chef knife.
Is it a cross between a chef's knife and a bread knife?
Kind of, sort of. I guess you need to see it now,
I
don't
do
you?
need to see this. I've never heard of a panini knife.
Well, and a plug for the chef's knife. He matched me up because I've lost the use of my hand a couple times with like tendonitis and tennis elbow, and he got me a bigger knife. I thought I have smaller hands, so I was using smaller knives, but the bigger knife is actually easier on the muscles.
Yeah, there's
and
another
so
hot
I was
tip.
able to use that. That was amazing.
If you feel like you're struggling with knife skills, your knife is too small.
It says Grand Prix 2 by Wusthof. I guess that's the name of the knife or the knife set or that it came with.
It didn't come in a set.
So
no, he
maybe-
doesn't find.
I don't buy sets.
I see. So it's an individual knife that you bought.
Yeah.
Grand Prix 2 Wusthof. I'll have to look for this.
I love this too, but just to look for it, the bolstered blade is the kind that's a little bit wider here, and it gets thinner.
What-
And stamped blades are
What
thin
do you
all the
use
way
it
across.
for besides bread? That would cut a
Tomatoes.
tomato.
Yeah.
Tomatoes.
If you look,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
serrated knives usually come to points, and that's a scalloped
Yes.
knife, so it doesn't come to points. So you never wear down those points and make it
I
useless.
like how
most,
big it is.
Most serrated blades you can't use a honer on. This one you can.
That's right here.
I like that size because
And
it's
I
not
can-
massive, but it's
I wish
like
it was
you
longer,
said, those
but
small serrated blades that come in a knife block.
it's so useless.
Yeah.
They're not.
They're
If you
completely
have a
useless.
giant tomato or a loaf of bread, you can't cut
Yes,
through.
it's true.
Throw it away.
Yeah, I know. I can't quite throw mine away. I,
can't
have
quite throw it
one
away.
because I give it to the
Maybe
kids.
it works for a small tomato.
A little tomato. I
It's a
know.
poorly designed steak knife, is what it
It's
is.
true. You're,
I'll
you're
look
so
for that.
And they
passionate
call
about
it,
can
that.
this
post
is
a
the
picture.
utility knife.
Mm-hmm.
It has no utility, so we'll call it a utility knife.
Speaking of, I have a hot tip.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Walmart utility brush.
Oh,
There is in the dishwasher soap and sponges and all that. They have these brushes hanging, and one says kitchen brush. It's a scrubber. It
brush.
has a handle and a scrubber.
yes.
If you get the kitchen brush, just throw it away. Right next to it is called a utility brush,
okay,
and it is a couple of dollars maybe.
really?
But the bristles are so close together, and they just are perfect for scrubbing
That's
as
incredible.
fast as possible and throwing either dishes in the dishwasher or I've given them to friends and relatives, like my daughter and daughter-in-laws. Like, listen, this is the
love it.
greatest thing ever. Because if you're even if you're hand washing, you have all this food and gunk you want to get off your plates. Just super. You don't have to get your hand with sponges. You have to get your nails and hands doing the scrubbing.
I've recently
yes.
graduated my wife to
He
this
has switched me.
realization.
To where I was using sponges, and then of course during the pandemic we were like, what do we cut so we can feed our babies?
Yeah.
And we cut sponges really fast, and you switched me to a brush.
Well,
But the
this
utility
brush with the
sounds
handle,
brilliant.
you don't have to get your hands all off in it.
Yeah.
It works brilliantly. It has the front, and then you can flip it over. It has even stiffer bristles, so it gets
Oh.
everything off.
We're buying this today.
Yes.
I know.
I also
I
use a
want one.
plastic scraper for
Yes.
We love those.
really
We
have
hard
that
stuck
too.
on stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this brush also you can wash in the dishwasher.
That's
If you have a
brilliant. Thank
dishwasher,
you.
I mean, you could just scrub it with Dawn soap. But if,
Yeah.
it's getting kind of like,
Yeah.
it's scrubbed
I
quite a
love
few greasy
that.
pans. Throw it in the dishwasher.
That's
it lasts
brilliant.
forever. So hot
Ooh,
tip there.
I love it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I buy it for
He's excited now.
y'all show up with beignets. I show up with utility brushes.
Both are very important.
I'm so excited. You have no idea.
Yeah, it's true.
Head to Walmart after this. It's
This
blue
show
and
is
white.
not sponsored by Walmart.
No, not sponsored by Walmart, but it is, I think, the Great Value brand. So if
That
you're
is so
trying to look for a
cool.
name brand, it probably won't work. It has to be the blue
you
and white
Charlie
one.
Brosh. Thank you so much.
The other, I
love
I could
that.
go nuts on the equipment segment.
I know,
The other
equipment.
piece of equipment
You have
that
to be
everyone
careful.
has to own, you must have a
Yes.
hotel pan.
If you're
Hotel
a bulk
pan.
cooker, it is fairly deep dish. It fits into a domestic oven. And what'd you say? What's the normal size? It's bigger than a 15 by 13. It's bigger. It's
I
like
think
a
they're
casserole dish.
12
It's
by
bigger.
26 or 12 by 28.
Do you buy this at a
brilliant.
restaurant supply store
Yes.
as
Yes.
well?
They stack.
Stainless steel. It looks
They're
like a
stainless
stainless steel. What do you call that? Casserole pan.
Yeah.
They're designed
It's
to fit in a
brilliant.
chafer. So when you go to a buffet line and they have, the little heat suckers with the candle.
Yeah,
little
it's meant to
spindle
go
cups on
into
there.
those
That's the food pan that fits in there.
Stands, yeah.
And it's a standardized size. So when you go into a restaurant and they have their prep lines, the lids
Yes.
they flip up on the refrigerators so they can pull stuff out of there. All those pans are called fractional pans. They're all a fraction of a hotel pan.
A fourth, an eighth.
So you have a whole pan, a half pan, a third pan, a 6 pan, a 9 pan, and they're all fractions of the hotel pan
brilliant.
size. So the whole restaurant industry functions on storing food
Yeah.
in a hotel pan or a fraction of a hotel pan size. Everything fits to that. So, but it's just even
absolutely
even at
fantastic.
home, if you're not
Yeah.
using prep lines, if you're not using
Yeah.
make tables and you're not using steam pans or chafers, like the hotel pan is just brilliantly
a
sized. It will
lifesaver.
go edge to edge in your home oven with a half inch of space on either
Yeah.
side. So if you want a pan that will fit an entire, utilize as much as your oven rack as possible, that is the one. It's stainless steel. It's not, you drop it, you might dent it. If you get a thick enough one, you probably won't.
It's basically
They're very
indestructible.
inexpensive.
There's almost a lip so you can easily grab it out
Oh,
and
yeah.
put it in because it's made to be suspended from something
And
in
it
a
just,
restaurant.
you can get them in
Yeah.
the standard depth, which is 2.5 inches, or you can get a 4-inch deep one, or you can get a 6-inch deep one.
Yeah.
What is
And,
your preference? It probably depends on what you're cooking.
It just depends, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I literally use them for cooking equipment. Like I will build a smoker and I will take a 6-inch hotel pan and invert it and use it
flip
as a
it.
lid
Yeah.
on just like make a rack, dig a hole, make a fire, like put something up there and invert a hotel pan over it and bam, I'm smoking something over an open fire in the middle of
It's
nowhere.
fantastic. But
It's amazing because it's stainless steel. What am I going to do to it?
crisps,
Yeah.
crumbles,
Oh,
coffee
yeah,
cakes, casseroles,
we will
lasagnas,
bake
soups,
we will bake desserts in
pad
it.
thai, anything.
I will not put lasagna in anything else.
No, you
ever
won't. Your
for
entire
anything.
recipe is constructed around the proportions that go in a
Yep.
hotel pan, and it's
Oh, yeah.
and we know the
It's
price
exactly.
exactly. Like it's the price per hotel pan is the exact cost
Yeah.
to make that lasagna. Yeah, it's really good lasagna
That
too.
sounds like a great
So
kitchen
it's
tool.
lovely for a mom and a homemaker who needs 2 pans of things. She needs to feed 50 people really fast. It's really fantastic.
And we will roast chickens in it.
Yeah, tons of chickens. I can
will
put like
roast-
6,
I will roast whole.
but 5.
I will roast beef in it.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, it doesn't
It's
matter.
just
And-
multi-purpose.
It's
And
just
they're
everything.
stackable. They're just lovely, weatherproof.
You can make
basically.
a baked macaroni and cheese
I
in it,
can. I would
Speaking of
say,
mac and cheese.
Oh yeah,
Right.
mac and cheese. You're thinking about it.
and then a
I
stock
know
pot.
a stock pot. I would say that's for me. Stock pot, and it does need to be a little bit on the bigger side. So a 6-quart, like a domestic one, like the Kirkland one we had from Costco,
Yeah, I
is
think
actually not quite big enough.
Is that
for
a
me.
6-quart or an 8-quart?
I need larger.
Yeah.
The one
We
you finally
have-
got
Do
me.
they have that at restaurant supply?
They do.
Yes,
The
we
8-quart?
have. Oh no, we have a
No, they have
24-quart
24
stock
quart.
pot.
Yes.
How do you fit? You don't fit that on a stove.
We do.
I do somehow.
You don't get to use any of the burners next to it.
no.
4 burners are in use.
No, just one burner. Because I
Yeah,
mean, if you
It's
just,
just hanging
if
over
all you're
the
doing
edge.
is
A
bringing
little bit,
liquid
yeah.
to a boil, it doesn't matter if only the small
The
center of the
center
pot.
is- yeah.
And I mean, it's a what's the term I'm looking for? It's got the disc on the bottom. It's sandwich layers of different
yes.
metal. It's
Yeah, I can't remember the
there's
name.
a term for that. I can't remember.
You're talking about I know what you're saying, but the flat surface, the flat topped ovens.
No. I'm talking the base of the pot.
The underneath part of the pot is
It's got
layered.
it's got layers. It's steel encapsulated with like aluminum and copper and so on and so
Gotcha.
forth.
Gotcha. So it
distributes
spreads the heat.
really,
Yeah.
really, really
It's-
well.
it's the only
even
way I
though
can properly
even
prep
though
onions.
even though the bottom of the
Yeah.
pan is way bigger than the biggest
Yeah.
burner on our stove,
It's spreading
if
the
all
heat
you're doing,
out.
if you're not searing meat and you need your entire pan to be perfectly even temperature, if you're just simmering stock, you're fine. If you're just bringing a soup up to temp, you're fine.
Right.
It works great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can put a very small pan on the opposite, catty corner burner while you're using that stock pot, and that's it. You don't
Yes.
get anything else
Yes.
on there.
Okay.
That's
It's
all
done.
you can do.
And the funny thing for that is it's so much bigger than our sink that the challenge, it's taking me 6 years to figure out how to wash it in
Water
a sink that
hose
is half
outside?
the size. Exactly. You figure out the angle and you get like part of the faucet in and you soak it. And it just takes a long
And
time.
you
I used to-
rotate it.
Exactly.
You
You
soak that
rotate it.
side and
Yeah, but it's amazing for me because that's the only way I can caramelize onions properly.
Oh, yeah.
Is I need them all over and I run out of room on every other pan.
Caramelizing onions takes 3 hours minimum.
Yes, it
Anything
does.
that tells you it takes less time than that is not caramelizing.
what
It's sauteing.
are you saying?
We have lived off many, many onions. It's very
How
cheap.
do you not burn them? I mean,
Super,
3 hours?
Lower heat.
super
Low
low
heat.
heat.
How often do you have to stir?
Oh, every 10 minutes or so.
I'm
For
a little
3
bit more of a
hours.
stirrer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a passive task, so you could do
You could
other
probably-
Something
things.
I've never
You could-
tasted.
You could probably
So
get away
Apparently
with
have
every
only ever had
20 or
sauteed
30
onions.
minutes.
There we
Yeah.
go. It's so special, but
So the
I'll
thing is-
deglaze it a lot.
Onions are pretty high starch, right? In the right conditions, starches will convert to sugars, but it takes time.
Yeah,
So if you're just caramelizing your onions for 30 minutes, those are still starches, and those starches are just kind of browning and blackening.
Right, they haven't
You're just
broken down
toasting
yet.
them, which is
Yeah.
delightful.
It's so
Toast
good.
tastes better than bread
Right.
because the browning is great. But caramelization is after you've spent a lot of time turning those starches into sugars. Then you actually caramelize the sugars, which is a slightly different process and produces a slightly different flavor profile. And then it's amazing, which is why you can make onion jam. You've turned the thing into a ball of, kind of savory sugar. Is that an oxymoron? Yeah, but
That
it's,
is so interesting.
yeah. So you start on fairly high heat because onions are high water content and you want to just get rid of as much water as possible, but you don't want to start browning them. So high enough heat to get rid of water, but as soon as that water starts disappearing, they're going to start browning. You're bringing that temperature way, way, way down.
Really
Yes.
low.
And you want to see, and you should julienne your onions if you're going to caramelize them.
A very thin slice,
Okay.
Yeah. Julienne the onions to
No
caramelize
dice.
them. No dice. No dice on that one.
No dice.
Julienne the onions if you're going to caramelize them. And then you should see the low, like barely starting to brown. That should start happening in the middle of the slice of onion almost as soon as it starts on the outside because you're converting those sugars and the heat is so low, it's penetrating all the way through. And so it's not just browning on the outside and then you have just, limp cooked onion in the middle. You should have caramelized onion side to side. And if you julienne the onions, you keep the cell structure intact and they don't fall apart and turn to mush.
Yeah.
So you can keep them in a pan for 3 or 4 hours and they still have something like their texture.
This would be amazing for a lot of dishes.
So
What is your favorite?
Oh my gosh.
Pulled pork.
Pulled pork with caramelized onion.
Holy cow.
We were making cubanos yesterday. We were
Yeah.
talking about that. That was
This
an
has been
adventure.
an amazing podcast and so many tips that only a chef could offer. I mean, it's just, I've learned a lot today. So thank
That's
you
so
so much
fun.
for joining me and taking
Thank
time out
you.
of your Saturday to
For
be
sure.
here.
Oh, this was fun. Thank you.
This was really fun. You were so kind. Thank you.
well,
and
thank
it's taken
you.
a while for us to get together.
I know.
was looking back at our texts
I
all the way
finally
from, like,
coordinated.
April.
You can
I'm
tell
so
how
sorry.
busy they are. That's
There we go.
okay.
Yeah. And I can honestly tell your listeners, like I've catered with you
Yeah.
and I've watched you take just bare bones instructions on the fly.
Yeah.
Like we need this done. You got
Yeah.
to do it this way. Go. And I've watched you act like a professional cook.
I think some moms
like
make the best
Well,
dishes.
thank you.
show
You're very
some
detail oriented.
serious, show some very serious ability, like
Yeah.
with under stress, and just learned and ran with it. So listeners out there, you found the right podcast. You're going to learn a lot here. She takes it, synthesizes it, and executes.
I have a few
Homesteaders,
mad skills,
homemakers.
just a few. He has massive amounts of mad skills.
There
I
you
have
go.
a few.
That's so fun. I think homemakers are amazing. They're incredibly skilled and
yeah.
They're
practiced.
very versatile. That's true.
Very
You kind of have to
versatile,
learn how to be
resilient.
versatile to cook for a family.
Yep, you've got the humility to be able to start over and over and over again because you never know what's going to interrupt.
Before I go, I wanted to share another hot tip from a listener in Kansas about caramelized onions. She says, I have to give you my newfound tip for caramelizing onions, the crock pot. I recently found an amazing recipe for French onion soup that caramelized the onions over several hours in the crock pot. And let me tell you, they were far better than anything I have attempted over the stove. I enjoyed the soup for days afterwards and look forward to trying the pork loin. And she gives me a link she continues, I did not need to finish the caramelizing on the stove as the recipe said. They were already amazing. So you could try Otto's method on the stovetop. You could try this caramelized onion method in the crock pot. Maybe it would be a little bit easier, and maybe it's one that you don't have to watch over quite as much as the stovetop method. Till next time, listeners.